Welcome back to the deep dive. I have to admit, when I first looked at the stack of research for today's topic, I thought I knew exactly what we were getting into.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because the topic is sexuality. And usually, when you open a book or read an article on sex, it falls into one of two very predictable categories.
Let me guess. It's either uh, a biology textbook about reproduction or a lifestyle magazine guide on how to have more fun.
Exactly. It's either making babies or seeking pleasure.
Right.
But the material we are covering today, it completely rejects that binary.
Yeah.
It argues that those two boxes are just way, way too small to contain what's actually happening between two people.
Yeah, they really reframe the whole thing.
In fact, the sources we're looking at today frame sexuality as something that sounds almost sci-fi. They call it a mechanism for nervous system synchronization.
It does sound a bit technical when you put it that way, doesn't
A
it?
little bit, yeah.
But it's actually a profound shift in perspective because it moves us away from the mechanics of the act,
Yeah.
like what goes where. And it forces us to look at the machinery of the connection. What is actually happening to your biology, to your brain, and your sense of safety while you're engaging with someone else?
And that is really our mission today. We are going to explore this idea that sex is actually a form of communication, like a way to sync up two separate nervous systems.
Exactly.
We're going to look at the healthy version of this, which the text describes as trust enacted physically.
Which is a beautiful phrase.
It really is. But, and here's where it gets heavy, we also have to look at the distortion of this.
The dark side of it.
Because the sources use some incredibly dark, almost visceral language to describe what happens when this goes wrong. They use the word cannibalistic.
It's a jarring word,
Yeah.
for sure. And I want to be clear right up front. When we get to that part, we aren't talking about horror movies here.
Right, no literal cannibals.
No, we are talking about a psychological dynamic where one person essentially consumes another. It's clinical, but it's also deeply human.
So no moralizing today, like this isn't a sermon.
Not at all. The goal isn't to say this is good or this is bad in a religious or moral sense. It's to look at the architecture of human attachment.
Okay.
We want to understand, does this interaction build the people involved up, or does it break them down? It's about function, not judgment.
Okay, let's start with the build-up part, the biology. Because the source makes this claim that sexuality is trust enacted physically.
Right.
Which sounds great, but biologically speaking, isn't being naked and vulnerable with another human being actually the literal definition of unsafe?
No, absolutely.
Like you're exposed, you have no defenses, so why doesn't our fight or flight response just kick in?
That is the million-dollar question right there. Because in a purely survivalist context, you are absolutely right. Vulnerability is dangerous.
Yeah.
But the source argues that in a healthy interaction, one that's actually based on safety, your biology pulls a bit of a magic trick.
A magic trick.
Yeah, it overrides that fear response with a very specific chemical cascade that is designed to bond you to that other person.
So I assume we're talking about the usual suspects here, like dopamine, serotonin.
Those are involved, yes.
Yeah.
But the heavy lifter, the real star of the show in this context, is oxytocin.
Ah, the cuddle hormone. I feel like I see that on greeting cards.
Yeah, we do tend to minimize it with cute names.
Right.
But the source describes oxytocin as something much more powerful. Think of it less like a cuddle chemical and more like a naturally produced anti-anxiety agent.
Oh, wow. So it actively reduces panic.
Exactly. When you are physically close to someone you trust, your brain just floods with this stuff. It effectively silences the amygdala.
Which is the part of your brain that screams danger or run away.
Precisely.
Mm.
It signals to your entire body you are safe here. You could lower your guard,
Okay.
and then you pair that with dopamine. Now, we usually think of dopamine as the pleasure chemical, right? Like the hit you get from sugar or getting likes on social media.
Right.
But in the context of bonding, it serves a different function. It creates a reinforcement loop. It basically tells the brain this connection is valuable. Pay attention to it. Stay right here.
So you have oxytocin creating the safety and dopamine creating focus and reinforcement.
And the result of that combo is what the text calls nervous system synchronization.
Okay, there's that term again.
Yeah, this is the core concept. You aren't just two separate entities having experience side by side. You are creating a feedback loop.
How does that work exactly?
Well, my calm helps create your calm. Your regulation helps regulate me. It creates this shared state of coherence.
Coherence. That's a term I usually hear in physics or maybe music. What does that mean for a relationship?
Think of it like noise-canceling headphones for your soul.
Oh, I like that.
The chaos of the outside world, the work stress, the anxiety, the fear, it all sort of settles down because the two nervous systems are tuning into each other.
They're syncing up.
Right. And the source actually notes that in this state, cortisol levels, which are your stress hormones, they actually drop significantly.
Which is the exact opposite of what happens in a stressful encounter. So the win of healthy sexuality isn't just the physical pleasure, it's this biological reset.
It's more than a reset, it's a fortification. The text lists the actual outcomes of this kind of connection, and it includes relational depth, emotional resilience, and a term I really loved, generative stability.
Generative stability. That sounds like something you'd want in a structurally sound building or a bridge. What does that mean for two people?
Well, if you break it down, generative means it creates energy. It gives
Yeah.
life. You leave the interaction feeling more capable, more creative, more online.
Right, instead of drained.
Exactly. And stability means the relationship isn't fragile. It doesn't just break when you lean on it. The text argues that healthy sexuality creates cooperative systems rather than competitive ones.
That distinction right there, cooperative versus competitive, feels huge to me.
Why is that?
Because if I look at pop culture or movies or even just how people talk about dating apps, sex is almost always framed as a competition.
Oh, definitely.
It's a conquest. Someone gets something from someone else. You're trying to score.
It's incredibly transactional,
Right.
and that is exactly the first step toward the distortion we're going to talk about later.
Right.
But before we go to that dark side, the source material lays out a roadmap for the healthy version. They call it Mother Nature's Way.
Mother Nature's way. Okay.
It's basically a set of 5 principles that act as the guardrails for that healthy generative connection we just described.
And I appreciate that these aren't just vague mystical ideas. They're actually quite specific.
Very specific.
So let's walk through them. Principle number 1 is maturity. Now, does this mean you have to be over 40 to have healthy sex?
Definitely not. We all know plenty of immature 40-year-olds.
Fair point.
In this context, maturity isn't about chronological age. It's about developmental capacity and agency.
Okay. What does that look like in practice?
It asks the question, do you have the self-awareness to know what you are doing? And do you have the agency to actually take ownership of your actions?
So it's about the internal software, not how long the hardware's been running.
That's a great way to put it.
It's about not acting like a child in an adult situation.
Right. It's the ability to say, I am choosing this and I understand what it means, which leads directly into principle 2, which is consent.
Now we hear consent everywhere. It's a huge buzzword right now.
It is.
But the notes here highlight a specific aspect of consent that I think often gets overlooked. They say it must be freely given, informed, and here's the kicker, reversible.
Reversible. That is the crucial one.
Meaning I can say yes at 8 p.m., but if I say stop at 8:15 p.m., the yes is gone.
Exactly. If you cannot change your mind, it's not consent, it's a contract.
And sex isn't a contract?
No, it's a dynamic living agreement. If you can't get off the train at any time, you aren't driving it, you're being taken for a ride. That reversibility is the safety valve that keeps the trust intact.
That makes total sense. Okay, principle 3, reciprocity. This feels like the antidote to that conquest mindset we talked about earlier.
It really is. Reciprocity means both give and receive. And I want to be really specific here. It doesn't mean you're keeping a scoreboard.
Like tracking points.
Right. It's not, I did this for you, now you owe me that. It's about the general flow of energy.
Almost like a conversation.
That is a perfect analogy. In a good conversation, we both talk, we both listen, we build on each other's ideas.
Yeah.
If only one person is talking, it's a lecture. If only one person is taking its theft. In healthy sexuality, there is a mutual exchange of vulnerability and pleasure. No one is just an object being used by the other.
Which brings us to principle 4. And this is the one that feels the most challenging, I think, in our current culture.
Emotional integration.
Yes. The text actually says, quote, sex is not dissociated from responsibility.
This is the heavy hitter right here. Because we live in a world that really loves the idea of no strings attached.
Oh, absolutely. Hookup culture is built on that.
We want the physical release without the emotional weight. But the source argues that biologically and psychologically, you cannot fracture yourself like that without consequences.
Well, you can't just leave your humanity at the door like a coat and pick it up on the way out.
You can try,
Yeah.
but that is called dissociation. It's a defense mechanism.
Wow.
If you have to mentally check out or shut off your empathy or pretend the other person is just a body in order to go through with the axon, you aren't practicing connection.
What are you practicing then?
You're practicing using someone. Integration means bringing your whole self, your feelings, your ethics, your care right into the room.
That is powerful. And finally, we have Principle 5, non-exploitation.
Right. And this basically creates a safety net for power dynamics. Look, power differences exist in the real world.
Yeah, of course.
Maybe one person is older, richer, your boss,
Right.
or just physically stronger. That's just reality.
Right.
But this principle states that you never weaponize those differences to get what you want. You don't use your leverage to bypass their consent or their well-being.
So when you stack these up, maturity, consent, reciprocity, integration, non-exploitation, the text says the result is vulnerability without collapse. I just love that phrase.
It's the ultimate goal, isn't it? To be completely open, but to not lose yourself in the process.
Yeah.
To merge with someone else, but remain a solid individual. Connection without erasure.
It sounds ideal, almost therapeutic, but we have to pivot now. Because the source material spends a lot of time warning us about what happens when these principles are ignored.
Yeah.
And they don't just call it bad sex, they call it predatory distortion.
This is where we really have to look at the shadow side of all this.
Mm-hmm.
And the metaphor they use to describe this is, well, it sticks with you.
It really does. They call it cannibalistic. When I first read that, I thought, okay, are we being a little dramatic here?
Right. It sounds like true crime.
Yeah, but as I kept reading, I realized they aren't talking about physical violence. They're talking about a psychological feeding frenzy.
It is dramatic, but honestly, it's accurate to the mechanism. Think about the difference between dining with someone and dining on them.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that paints a picture.
In the healthy model we just discussed, the partner is a collaborator. In the predatory model, the partner is a resource. They are fuel.
Right.
The predator isn't looking for a connection, they're looking to be fed.
Fed in what way, though? Like, what are they actually consuming?
They consume whatever they lack internally. Validation, reassurance, a sense of power, control.
So the other person's body or attention basically becomes the battery that charges their ego.
Exactly.
The text lists these specific substitutions that happen in this dynamic. It says consumption replaces connection.
Yes.
And then it says validation replaces intimacy. I really want to pause on that one because I feel like the line between validation and intimacy can get pretty blurry for people.
It can be very subtle, but think of it like a mirror.
Okay.
If I am being intimate with you, I am looking at you.
Mm-hmm.
I see your complexity, your needs, your humanity. But if I am seeking validation, I am just using you as a mirror to see myself.
That actually clears it up perfectly. I'm looking at you to see if I'm attractive. I'm looking at you to see if I'm powerful.
Exactly. I'm checking my own reflection in your eyes. And once I feel good about what I see, once I've got that ego boost, I don't need the mirror anymore. I can just set it down. That's why these types of relationships often have a discard phase. Once the resource is consumed, the person is simply no longer useful.
That is chilling. It really explains why you can feel so drained after being with someone like that. You literally feel used.
You feel depleted because you have been depleted.
Yeah.
You were the battery.
The source also mentions control replaces reciprocity.
Right. Instead of that tennis match of give and take we talked about, it becomes a monologue.
One-sided.
Completely. I dictate the terms. I decide when we start, when we stop, and what happens. Because if I control the interaction, I don't have to be vulnerable. I don't ever have to risk rejection.
So why do people do this? Is it just pure malice? Are there just evil people out there walking around doing this? The source suggests the motivation is actually a form of regulation.
Yeah, and this is the really empathetic twist in the research. It doesn't excuse the behavior at all, but it does explain it.
Right.
The predator, or the person acting in a predatory way, is usually trying to solve an internal problem. They feel empty. They feel insecure. They feel small.
And rather than going to therapy or doing the work,
rather than doing the hard work of building their own self-esteem from the inside out, they try to import it from the outside in.
yeah,
They use another person to regulate their own nervous system. It's an attempt to soothe their own anxiety, but they are doing it by parasitizing someone else's life force.
parasitizing. There's that biological language again. So while healthy sex builds trust and reduces stress for both people, this distorted version might reduce stress for the taker, but it amplifies it for the giver.
It's completely asymmetrical. One person wins, the other loses. It fractures the attachment system.
Because it teaches the victim's nervous system that connection is dangerous or I am just a thing to be used.
Exactly. It creates trauma instead of resilience.
It's frightening because from the outside looking in, the physical act might look identical. You could have two couples and physically they're doing the exact same things.
Right.
But the internal architecture, the intention behind it is completely opposite.
Completely opposite. One is building a home, the other is strip mining a resource.
So if we step back and look at this entire landscape from the oxytocin-fueled bonding all the way over to this ego-driven consumption, we have to ask the big so what.
Right.
How do we actually tell the difference in real time?
Yeah.
The source distills this down to one comparison that I just think is brilliant.
Yes. They argue that the true measure of sexuality is not intensity, it is integration.
Intensity versus integration. We really need to unpack that because our culture absolutely loves intensity. We want the fireworks. We want the movie scene in the pouring rain.
We really do. We chase that rush. We think that if the passion is overwhelming or if the relationship feels like a roller coaster, it must be true love.
Right.
But the source argues that intensity is actually cheap. It's incredibly easy to manufacture. You can get intensity from a car crash.
That's true.
You can get intensity from a volatile, toxic fight.
So just because your heart is pounding doesn't mean it's healthy.
Exactly. Predatory or distorted sexuality is often incredibly intense. It's high stakes, it's dramatic, but it fractures you. It splits your body from your heart or your pleasure from your values. It leaves you feeling scattered and confused.
Whereas healthy sexuality integrates.
It brings all the parts of you together.
Yeah.
Your body, your emotions, your responsibility, your care. It doesn't ask you to leave part of yourself behind.
It's life-affirming because it makes you more whole, not less.
Exactly.
The text has this great line about the dividing line between the two. It says the difference between healthy and predatory isn't desire because everyone has desire. The difference is maturity and respect.
It sounds so simple,
Yeah.
almost boring compared to the drama of the cannibal metaphor.
Right.
But that maturity is what actually allows you to handle the power of that connection. It allows you to experience the oxytocin without getting addicted to the control.
Yeah.
It allows you to enjoy the dopamine without needing to crush the source of it.
It transforms the experience from a resource extraction to a renewable energy source.
Yeah.
Generative stability, to bring back that phrase from the very beginning.
That's the key.
Mhm.
Can we build something that generates more than it takes?
So to recap the journey we've been on today, because we've covered a lot of ground here,
We really have.
we started by reframing sex not just as reproduction or fun, but as a biological mechanism for nervous system synchronization.
We looked at the chemistry, how oxytocin and dopamine are quite literally designed to turn off fear and create a safe zone for two people.
We walked through the 5 principles of Mother Nature's way: maturity, consent, reciprocity, emotional integration, and non-exploitation.
And we stared into the abyss of the cannibalistic distortion where people become mirrors and batteries and connection is entirely replaced by consumption.
Leading us to that final, crucial distinction: don't mistake intensity for integration.
It's a really powerful framework. And honestly, it's one that applies to way more than just sexuality.
Absolutely.
You can look at your friendships, your business partnerships, even your relationship with your job through this exact same lens.
That is a fascinating thought to leave on. The source talks about vulnerability without collapse. So the question for you listening is, where else in your life are you accepting intensity when you should be looking for integration?
Are you chasing the high of a chaotic situation just because it feels big? Or are you building connections that actually allow you to be safe?
Are you feeding on the drama, or are you being fed by the connection? It's a question really worth sitting with. Because if we can learn to spot the difference between a dinner guest and a predator, we change not just our relationships, but our entire experience of being human.
I could have said it better.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll see you next time.